Minutes, another recap of the headlines. And welcome to all of you to the France 24 debate. Tonight we focus on what appears to be a new trend, the rich and the super rich who want to pay more taxes to help the economy. In fact, they're crying out to pay more taxes. It all started with the world's third richest man, American business tycoon Warren Buffett, publicly asking to pay more taxes to help reduce America's debt. Here in France, 15 billionaires followed suit. In Italy and Germany, the wealthy have also said they want to pay more to help balance their country's finances. So is this just a fad? Can these good intentions actually produce the desired effect? And why are billionaires offering more money, and why now? We're going to be putting all these questions to my guests this evening. We have with us Tariq Mwakil. Thank you very much for being with us. You're an economist. You're author of a book called Asset Markets, Portfolio Choice, and Macroeconomic Activity. Thanks for being with us. We also have a France 24 usual suspect, Craig Pepitas, a senior writer for Bloomberg News, who's undoubtedly going to put some controversy into this debate. And joining us live from Brussels via satellite is Sony Kapoor, managing director of Redefine, an international think tank on reforming the financial system. And we also have with us David Logan, an economist for the nonpartisan think tank that's called Tax Foundation. It's a think tank based in Washington, who is joining us from Washington. All right. Now, let's get into the heart of the debate. Warren, the first question I want to put, and it's going to be to you, Craig, is what happened? How come billionaires are suddenly crying out to pay more taxes? It's not something we've seen many times before.
Public relations.
That's all?
In my view, yes. This whole debate orbits around margin. Warren Buffett is Croesus. He has a lot of money, an awful lot of money.
He's worth $50 billion.
All right, he can lower. It's easy for him to lower his margin and keep up the kind of lifestyle he has. This whole question orbits around how much. What's the number that makes someone wealthy? Is that number assets? Is that number salary income? Or is it both? And then the next question is, they're saying in Europe, 500,000 euros they want to tax. Well, some people might find 500,000 euros to be a substantial amount of money.
That's here in France, a new policy.
Yeah, here in France. Well, let's say that you're a family that has 3 children in university in the United States. That 500,000 euros is not a lot of money in that case. So the point is, for someone who's going to be taxed, who's making, let's say, an income of 500,000, if he's going to be taxed more, his margin is going to hurt more. He's not going to be able to keep his kids in school to maintain his lifestyle than an extremely wealthy man who's in the billionaire status, who could pay a little more, and it's really not going to affect his personal bottom line or way of life.
All right, but Warren Buffett is saying that his tax rate is currently 17%. He pays just under $7 million in tax, and he says, I'm paying 17% tax, while other people in my office who are not billionaires are paying 36% tax. So Congress has been too friendly with the super rich. You don't believe that they're...
No, he's right. No, he's right. The tax code, the federal tax code in the United States, since it was launched, at the beginning of the 20th century, has been a mosh pit of confusion, fear, and loathing. It's the code that really isn't a code. A guy I know who ran one of the biggest companies in the world, Refco, a trading company, used to say there's only 2 things that generate business. One is interest rates, and the second is tax code. The moment any new tax code, and this is very important to understand, the moment any new tax code is floated by any government around the world, you're going to have platoons of the highest priced lawyers in each individual country finding out, discovering new loopholes that they can jump through based on the tax code. This has been going on for decades and decades and decades. So don't think that right now there aren't platoons of lawyers in France or the United States or Germany or anywhere else who are looking for new loopholes here for their clients.
All right, but hold on. The main point here, Tariq, we have a man who is the third richest man in the world who is saying, hey, hold on, you need to tax me more because right now all our economies need to save money, and you're actually giving me tax breaks that I actually don't need. I have more money than I need. I can give you more money if you'll just tax me more. Do you also think this is just a PR stunt?
No, not really. I think it's a fair proposal because for most of the past century, Europe and America's wealthiest people, wealthiest citizens have paid higher percentage of their income than they do pay now. And with all the cuts, the tax cuts introduced for rich people in the past 2 decades, and all the tax breaks introduced during the past 2 decades, we now get to the phenomenon of Mr. Buffett paying a lower tax rate than many of those people in his office.
Let's look at the words used by Warren Buffett in that editorial that he published in the New York Times. It was mid-August, August 14th, in fact. He was saying the conclusion was that he's been speaking with his very rich friends, and he said that basically Congress has been giving him an easy ride all this time. And in the article, he actually says, we were paying more taxes in the 80s and 90s, and the tax rate has just been decreasing. And this is a question that I'm going to put to David Logan, economist for Tax Foundation in Washington. David, how come the tax rich for the super rich has been decreasing even though government actually needs more money?
Well, you know, the improper focus here is on the mega rich and the fact that their effective tax rates since 1986 really has been decreasing. That's not fallacious. What is more important, though, is to put it into some kind of context, a much more important context, which in the United States over the past 30 years, everyone's effective rate has been decreasing. And the effective rate paid by the lowest 2 quintiles of taxpayers has been decreasing at a faster rate than those paying in the upper quintile, the upper 2 quintiles. It's also worthy pointing out that Mr. Buffett claiming a 17.4% effective rate is an extreme outlier. The effective rate paid by those making more than $10 million a year in the United States is actually about 27%. In addition, Mr. Buffett fails to consider the fact that his capital gains, actually his dividends, are double taxed. And if you look at the OECD statistics page, what they actually use to calculate dividend taxation in the OECD is the combination of the corporate income tax and the dividend tax, tax on dividend income for individual taxpayers. If you use that metric, then we actually rank 4th highest in the world. So not only is Buffett an outlier of effective rates, but his claims of effective rates on people in his office, if that is true, they are extreme outliers. If they're making, say, $60,000 to $100,000, their effective rate on average of those income classes is more like 5 to 12%.
All right, hold on, David, because outlier here is a statistical terms. It means basically that you're saying he's not representative of other billionaires and other super rich people in the United States. Essentially, you're saying Warren Buffett claims to be speaking for the super rich, but he doesn't. Is that right?
Yeah, well, he's in his op-ed, he explicitly states that he wants to raise rates on those making more than $1 million per year and raise them even higher for those making $10 million a year. Buffett may be not an outlier on those with net worth and making in the billions of dollars per year, but the reality is that's 0.00 something of all taxpayers in the United States. So to look at him as an example is not representative of what the United States should be looking at as a whole as far as tax reform is concerned.
All right, you're essentially saying, you're getting to my next question, which is, can this actually work? Whatever you think of it, whether you think it's justified or not, can it actually help the economy to tax the rich? And I'm going to be putting that question now to Sony Kapoor, if we can just bring you into the debate. You're managing director of Redefine, a think tank that thinks about reforming the financial system. Sony, I mean, does it make economic sense? Is there economic merit to this proposal by Warren Buffett?
Absolutely. Now, there are 2 separate points. One is the specific case of what Warren Buffett has said, but the other is the more general case of the tax structure in the economies and the fact that we are in a time of fiscal hardship and we need tax revenue from somewhere. And the focus exclusively on expenditure cuts has got us stuck in a trap where every time there's a market disturbance, there is more austerity, and that reduces demand from the economy. And if it was just like the early 90s, when only Sweden and Norway were in crisis, you can actually pull yourself out of that through exports. But given the problem is actually widespread in the United States, in Japan, and in Europe, nobody from Mars is going to come and buy our goods. So we need to handle this internally. So we need more tax revenue. Now, even if the super rich that Warren Buffett has himself said are actually taxed at the rates he suggests, the actual revenue contribution would be rather small. It is a good idea. It will have a net positive impact on growth at the margin because people who earn less are more likely to spend, and that acts like a stimulus anytime there's a redistribution in an unequal economy. But the more important point is there is a very large amount of untaxed wealth. As we have seen in the recent discussion on Liechtenstein, on Switzerland, there is a massive amount of rich and super rich money which is lying completely untaxed in tax havens. And the effective tax rates that the rich pay have come down, yes, because of tax breaks and lower capital gains taxes. But the fact that is that we're actually only looking at a small percentage of their wealth. There is a significant percentage of the wealth held offshore in secret bank accounts and investments, which actually are taxed at a zero rate. So in effect, the inequity in the tax system is much greater. And as we know what's going on now in Switzerland, they've started to think about paying negative interest rates on bank accounts. So this money could instead be productively invested domestically. It could be paid to the government, which would mean that European governments don't have to cut back on investment programs and jeopardize growth. So it is good for economic growth, it is good for fairness, and it is also good for financial stability because it is these same zones of secrecy that also allowed a large amount of risks to be built up off balance sheet out of the eye of the regulator. So I think this is a very important, critical debate to be having at this point, but we need to expand this.
All right, Sony, you're actually saying that taxing the rich is a good idea. Not only that, but we should also tax the money that they've stashed away in tax havens. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. As you were saying this, I could see Craig Kapitas to my left here, who's a writer for Bloomberg News, did not seem to agree with you. Craig?
Well, I'd like to know Sony's figure for how much money someone has to, in his world, make to be considered rich or wealthy. I want to know the number.
Sony, do you have a number?
It's okay. Assuming that you think the tax revenue needs to come from somewhere, for a fixed amount of tax revenue, what really matters is relative wealth. In a place like India or Zambia, a person earning, even $1,000 might actually be considered to be all right, $1,000 a month. And as you said, in the United States, that would not be the case. So it is a relative concept. But if you were to push me, I would say the so-called definition of high net worth individuals, people who have investable liquid assets of more than 1 million, which is what most of the wealth management firms use, is a decent benchmark.
Actually, $1 million is $1 million is no longer $1 million. There was a study done a few months ago, which I wrote about. I can't recall the name of the bank and study group out of Boston, but they surveyed quite a few millionaires, hundreds of them. And I believe that it was a very high proportion. I think 6 out of 7 of them said that $1 million was worthless in the current economy. And for them to feel secure with their families, etc., $1 million now in their mind's eye was $6 million. That $6 million is today's benchmark for what we for decades have said, oh, he's a millionaire. $1 million is not a lot of money in the current economy. If you have a family, you have to feed people if you want a house. So, and the whole...
$1 million is still much more than 50,000. $1 million is still much more than 30,000. It is at the end of the day...
Cost it out, Sonny. Cost it out. Cost it out. Cost it out with the mortgage on your home. Cost it out with, say, 2 kids going to college. Cost it out with the car you might have. I'm not talking a Rolls Royce here. You cost out $1 million, let's say in the U.S., for example, or in New York City, that is not a lot of money. You cost out $1 million even in Chicago, Illinois, that's not a lot of money. You cost out $1 million in Paris. It's not a lot of money if...
Well, yes, let's take a step back. No. I agree it's not a lot of money. And 10 million is more than 1 million, but in the same way that 1 million is more than 100,000 or than 10,000. As long as we have people who actually have no jobs, whose federal benefits in the United States and also in Europe now are being cut back, who actually have also got a family of 2 or 3, who rather than having, just a normal car, have actually nothing and use the public transport in the United States. And you know how few people use that in buses in Kansas City, for example. Fact of the matter is we have overstretched ourselves. We have borrowed far too much in our private accounts and public accounts, and someone needs to share some of the burden. And it has to be so. Someone earning 10 million will need to contribute more proportionately than someone who is earning 1 million, who will have to contribute more than who is earning 100,000. So the absolute figure is not important. The relative distribution
the absolute figure is very important if you're the person the government's coming to take your money when you have responsibilities that you have to take care of. I appreciate your position, but what you're trying to do with legislation or suggesting to do with legislation is really only something that can be done, as some commentators in the United States have said, including Zbigniew Brzezinski, is through some sort of revolution.
All right, now, Sony, Craig, I'd like you to both
Yeah.
hold on for just 1 second and listen to what Jacques Attali had to say earlier on this afternoon. Now, Jacques Attali is a respected voice in the economic world here in France. He's president of Planet Finance, and this is what he said to Douglas Herbert in an interview.
We are intertwined, the US, China, and Europe, and I think that we are on the verge of a very, very deep depression if we don't put in place a global governance.
All right. Now, Jacques Attali is saying we're on the verge of a depression if we don't do anything. The question we're asking is the attempt or the proposal by super rich in the US and Europe to pay more taxes, is that an attempt to avert a global depression? Is it a last-ditch attempt to try and save the world economy?
Yes, I think we have two elements in the current debate and behind the Buffett proposal. The first one is of course the fairness of a tax system in the West, and the second one is the current situation. We are in difficult times, and I've been invited a few times in this show to discuss the Eurozone crisis, and I think most people would agree that we need to curb the rise of government deficit, and we have only 2 solutions to do so. The first one is to cut in government spending. The second one is to increase tax. So, and I think that also I think we need to do some government cuts. It will not be enough. And the thing is that we know that middle class and poor people are the ones who benefit more, and we need more government cuts. So they will be the one the most hit by government cuts.
All right, Tariq, we're going to get back to those inequalities in just a few moments, but we're going to have a short break now. Join us just after the news headlines for the second part of our debate.